All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever it is for you on the snowy planet. Well, it's snowy here off and on anymore in what is it? Where are we at, Dale? Windsor? Windsor. We are in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, also known as the Static Planet, of course. I'm sitting on a phone book, like I was telling Dale backstage. I'm sitting on a phone book. I'm sitting a little bit straighter. This is our final guest of the 2024 year, 2024 season. How do you say that? I don't know. Anyways, we've had a banter year with guests, and going out with this guy, it couldn't be any better. I couldn't think of anybody better than the guests that we're going to have with us today. This guy is wearing many hats, I'll tell you that. He's done so much in the paranormal. But before we get to him, Dale, you were just on a show. Because I was at work. I got the notification. I was like, we are? I can't. My hands are literally tied. How did it go? I didn't even get to see it yet. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I was over on the Tipsy Witchy show with our good friend Chelsea Roberts.
Oh, yes.
And Donna's usually with her, but Donna was off celebrating her anniversary. So I got to sit down and talk with Chelsea for about an hour, and her better half, Mitchell, and her brother, I can't think of his, but yeah, Conrad. And it was fun. It was just, just the usual, sitting around, hanging out, talking about ghost stories and everything that's been happening and all the great things that we've been up to and what we're gonna be up to come 2025. I can't believe 2025 is already in the sights and it's coming quick. And what I truly can't believe is that this is our last show of 2024 already. Like, what an amazing year we've had with all the events and all the amazing guests that we have. So yeah, it's been quite a year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what 2025 is going to bring us and what cool adventures we're going to be up to next.
Yeah, oh my God, I can't believe the opportunities we've had. I mean, 3 years ago when we started this, dude, we were just talking, throwing darts in. That'd be cool if we could do this. Imagine if that happened. Imagine they say, what if it goes better than you expected? And I'm telling you, man, it's gone way better than you and I could have ever dreamt. And I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. Lots to be grateful for sure. People, places, opportunities. We've had a lot happen in the last few years. I mean, this year exploded for Windsor, Ontario's on the Paranormal Voice, Dale Quigley and myself, of course. So many things to be grateful for. I wish I could have been on the show last night with you and Chelsea and the gang, but I know you represented because you do. You're awesome like that. You always make us sound way bigger than what we are.
Well, I'm sure your ears were ringing because we were talking a lot about you.
I'm sorry. You should have, as Tim Shaw says, you should have aimed higher.
No, Chelsea was really excited, and they're really excited that you're back into wrestling again, and they're really they love watching everything you're doing on Facebook. Whenever you post about wrestling, they think that's the coolest thing in the world. So, like I said, dude, we were missing you, but yet we were still talking about you. We were talking like you were still there.
That's amazing. That is truly amazing. So, well, I guess I want you to introduce this guest because, yes.
All right. Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, sure. Why not? Our guest tonight is a gentleman that I've having the pleasure of getting to know over the past year, maybe even 2 years now at this point. Yeah, I'm thinking 2 years because I met him at Potographs a few years ago for the first time, and then we've had the pleasure of hanging out with him at a few other events. He is an author. He is a paranormal investigator. You've probably seen him on some of the paranormal shows, the TV's Haunted Case Files. That, of course, takes place in the UK. Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal Revenge, Paranormal Night Shift, and Paranormal 911. And he's also been on Destination Fear. So, like I said, and above all, I mean, books. Like, I think he is very close, if not over by now, of 30 books that he has written. And the amazing part about it is like he started writing, I believe it was 2013 when he was writing, and like I said, he's been on fire. It's like every time you you turn around and go on Amazon, he's got a new book out there. So it's a great pleasure to have tonight's guest. He's a gentleman I respect so much and look up to. He's done amazing things. Let's welcome tonight, Mr. Richard Estep.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on part of the TPV Nation. We're so happy to finally get you on here. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, we're sorry for all the reschedules and things like that. I
Yeah.
know we've tried to do this several times.
Hey,
Yes, you're much
life.
sought after for sure.
Yes, yeah. But he keeps himself busy. I mean, you are not only are you a paranormal investigator, TV personality, but you're also an EMT or an ambulance attendant, which is
Paramedic.
truly a paramedic, which is truly amazing in itself. Like what an amazing like job that is. It is. I mean, I have respect for those guys that are out there and have to go and see horrible things that people don't wish to ever see and deal with life situations that we don't want to see either. So we applaud you for being a first responder. That is such an amazing job. So let's start out like how did you get into that field?
I had no desire to be in that field. I moved to the States in 1999. I worked in IT. Um, I missed the camaraderie of a military unit. I was in the British Territorial Army and I missed that. So I was looking at maybe joining the National Guard or the Army Reserve. And then 9/11 happened. And I saw that there was a way that I could contribute to my community and to the country that I was going to become a citizen of ultimately. And so I went to my nearest firehouse and asked, "Hey, how do I sign up and do this?" That was on 9/11, and that's the date that I started my journey that I'm still on.
Wow, I mean, that's 9/11. Like, yeah, I mean, for those to be in that was had to be truly heart-wrenching to see everything that happened as a result of these attacks on the United States. I mean, I think it's going to be one of those situations. It doesn't matter what year it is, people will talk about it. You'll remember exactly where you were when that happened.
Sure, and as well, we absolutely should remember that.
Yes.
Agreed, for sure. Richard, so I want to we're going to get right down to the nitty gritty here. And I love that you say in your bio, my love of all things ghostly. So, and no doubt about it, a man that writes 30 books about the paranormal has an undying passion for sure. It says here at a very young age, I want to know the age, of course, staying at your grandparents' haunted house in England.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, please.
Well, I mean, it's I think we all love ghost stories as kids, right? And just those of us that are in this field to this day, we just never outgrew it, and that's a wonderful thing. But I can't have been any older than like 7 or 8, and I heard the stories
Wow.
about from my aunts and uncles, my stepfather, about the ghost of the old lady that had tucked them into bed at night because my grandfather was off in Burma fighting in the Second World War. And while he was gone, my grandmother was, trying to raise a family and keep everything going. And, you had the Luftwaffe bombing the crap out of the city at night, and you had a single woman on her own, as most women were, raising families and working to support the war effort. So we can only imagine the stress of what that must have been like. And they all told the same story about this lady that would come into their bedroom at night and make sure they were all tucked in the bed and asleep or going off to sleep. And they, in the way that kids have, never questioned what this adult was doing, looking in on them. And it was only when my grandfather came back from Burma that they started talking about this. And my grandmother was like, "I have no idea what you are talking about." And they all described this lady the same. And it was a former tenant of their house that had died downstairs. And my suspicion is, we talk about the motivations of ghosts and the reason behind a haunting. I think that this was a mission-driven ghost that I think she recognized the need for some support in this very difficult time. And I think she was just keeping a maternal eye on the family while my grandfather was not around. And they never saw her again. Once the war ended, he came home, was demobilized. She went on to whatever we all go on to afterwards, I like to think. So, but I ended up sleeping in that bedroom alone. And so I'd heard these stories, and of course, when you're that age, every creaking floorboard, is a
Yeah.
footstep, right?
Oh God.
And so I would be kind of under these covers, like peeking up above the covers, kind of half hoping I would see a ghost and half terrified that I might. And that
No doubt.
yeah, that gets into your blood at a young age. And,
Yep.
I'm still doing that 40 years later, 50 years later.
Yeah, growing up in England, I mean, we over here in Canada, we always hear about how active and how haunted because of how old a lot of the buildings are in England. I mean, besides your grandmother's house, did you pursue any other haunted places at a young age?
No, you didn't get to do that. I mean, there was no paranormal culture there as such back in the 70s and 80s. The closest you could get was go to the library and check out. I did this every book by what I consider to be the greats, people like Peter Underwood and Andrew Green, the gentleman ghost hunters. Unfortunately, there was a very limited pool of stuff to draw from. But if you wanted to learn about this, you had to read about it. That was really it. And there weren't too many places, I'm sure, interested in letting young boys poke around in the dark looking for dead people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I so when you came to the United States in 1999, now you founded a paranormal team when you.
Mhm. I ended up working with one in the area first. And so there was another group, and I got my kind of feet wet, learning their way of doing things. And as we so often see in this field, let's just say we did not ultimately see eye to eye.
Right.
So when you do that, that happens. When you do that, I went my own way. They went theirs. Good luck to them. They are still going. And I kind of decided to start doing it my own way. Did a lot of residential cases with my new group, worked with a whole lot of good people, still do, and finally decided I wanted to start telling some of those stories in print. Because hopefully there is a kid out there that, much like I was at that age, really wants to read about these strange goings on and will be inspired maybe to go do it themselves.
So you didn't start, I mean, even before you became part of this group in 99, before you even came to the United States, mid 90s, that's when you started to investigate. You didn't do anything up until around then. So what was like, if you best you can recall, the first time you went out? Did you go out on your own? Did you have people with you? What went on and what happened?
Oh yeah, I'll never forget that. I was with a group in the UK. I wrote about this in my first book, In Search of the Paranormal. I was with a group in the UK that back then, it wasn't like it is today, where you can't throw a rock without hitting a paranormal team. There was almost nobody doing this.
Yeah.
So we would get these strange cases. The local newspapers had no idea who to call when someone was terrified in their own home. I mean, what do you call the police? They're going to arrest a ghost. So they called us in, and we would turn up, with the equipment of the day, which was like tape recorders and very basic equipment, and we would do investigations. And the first one I recall was a residential haunting. It was a single mom and her kids, and they were having strange activity in the house. And it was only when we dug into it a little bit, we learned that one of the lodgers had been, as they used to say back then, dabbling in the occult. I love that phrase. So, it got a little bit scary. Like, for example, the mom of the household was in the bathroom one day, tried to open the door, and it was held shut from the outside. There was nobody else in the house at the time, nobody. So things of that nature. And then the usual stuff, footsteps, disembodied voices, those kind of things. To that point, I'd always been open-minded about the paranormal, right? But I think every one of us, Dale, Michael, anyone listening, we all have that moment where you can believe in this stuff all that you want intellectually, but until you experience it yourself, until it literally, hits you in the face, sometimes literally, but close enough. you don't really, you don't internalize it, right?
Right.
So what really happened was that the kitchen, I had been sitting in front of the kitchen door for about an hour in the living room, just running tapes, recording, trying to do EVP stuff. Nobody was in that kitchen. Nobody got past me. I didn't move. The back door was closed and locked, and we had taped it. I used masking tape, like painter's masking tape, just to seal, number one, to seal drafts, and number two, if somebody tries to, play silly buggers and get into your location and play games with you, you'll know because the tape is going to be disturbed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, then as now, investigations were fueled by caffeine, just in a different form,
Of course.
And so in Britain, at least, we would make tea on the hour. Here it's like coffee and Mountain Dew, and energy drinks now. But so I went in, it's my turn to make tea, and I stopped. The kitchen drawer had been pulled out, the cutlery drawer, and knives, forks, and spoons had all been laid out along the side in the kitchen on the side, and they hadn't been there when I closed that door. I know it. Nobody got past me, so how could this possibly have happened? And I looked at the windows, I looked at the door, everything was secure and locked and taped. Even if someone else had a key, they couldn't have got in without breaking the seals. I had, and to this day have, no non-paranormal explanation for how that happened. And that's when it kind of hit me in the face, and I'm like, this stuff really is real. I am in an honest to goodness haunted house. Cool.
That's nuts. I can't imagine seeing silverware lined up. I've never heard a story like that. I mean, we've heard some stories, and there's always something that's going to make you go, "Oh my God, this is an oh my God moment." That's nuts. I mean, when you see that? I mean, what's going on in your head? Was it where you haven't was it like the did I do that? Where you second. It's funny with the paranormal. It's like even when you mentioned earlier, you hear a disembodied voice. How many times even, and it could happen, not that it's happened that much, but I mean, it could happen a million times to any of us. And you always go, did I just hear that?
Yeah, this is one of those things though you can't rationalize, right? You clearly my mind was not playing tricks. If it's a squeaking floorboard or whatever it may be, it's the house settling, right? Because often it is. You learn, I think, if you're diligent about this work, you learn how the structure behaves, at different times of the day, how it expands in a warm day and then cools down at night and contracts and creaks, that kind of stuff. But there is no way at all, as I stood there looking at this cutlery, that I could explain it. Just no way. So then your entire worldview kind of changes. Because, I'd read all the books and I've been fascinated and I believed in this stuff with a lowercase b. Now I believe in all capitals, underlined, italic, 28-point font.
What a statement.
Yeah.
Richard, what?
Go ahead, Michael. John.
Sorry, I thought I didn't mean to step over you there. You mentioned, so did you use, back in the day, you would have used an actual tape recorder? Is that right?
Yeah, and I still do.
I was going to ask you, okay, what do you prefer? Everybody's different. That's why I want to ask that. I mean, is that your favorite piece of equipment? If you had, you can only have one piece of equipment aside from our own selves. Not that I'd ever sit here and say I'm psychic or anything like that, but I'm sure, excuse me. We all have that sixth sense, if you will, right? But so not bringing your own person, but I mean, one piece of equipment, would it be a tape recorder or what would it be?
No, it'd be a notebook and pen. I think, not to sound glib, but I think we get a little too hung up on the tech. And if you go back, you look at the Victorian era ghost hunters, the Sir Oliver Lodge, William Crookes, Arthur Conan Doyle, Catherine Crowe, people like that. The original investigators had none of the tech that we have today. And yet they turned in very professional, very well thought out, very credible reports. For the most part. They didn't get lost in the gadgets and the flashing lights and things like that. They applied the scientific model as best they could. They applied a sense of rationality anyway, and some critical thinking, Maybe Conan Doyle wasn't always the greatest at that, but the rest of them did. They applied critical thinking to it. So I think we've drifted really far away from that in the digital age. So to me, I do like the more old school it is, the more I think it has a place. You
Interesting.
know, I was at the fire department the other day, just as an aside, and I won't name which one because I teach several, but it was an interesting story. They just taken delivery of a brand new ladder truck. Right, this thing is well over $1 million. It has all the bells and whistles. It's fantastic. And I was talking to the firefighters about it. How do you like the new truck? And they're like, "Oh, it's great, but it's really heavily automated." And I'm like, "Okay." Is that a bad thing? And they're like, yeah, because we had this one part pop out on its own when it wasn't supposed to. Because there's a system that does this and a subsystem that does that. And it's so complex that if this subsystem breaks, it has to be repaired by a technician. You have to take it in, you know. Whereas the more basic something is, the more robust something is, the less prone I think it is to fail. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Am I making sense? Like the best truck
Yeah.
I actually
Excuse
still own the best vehicle I ever owned in my life, a 2003 Ford F-150. And I think it's still ticking at 220,000 miles because it's 20 years old. It's engineered that way. You know, you look at stuff that's coming off the assembly line now, and I'd be amazed if you got 220,000 miles out of some of today's vehicles. They have all the bells and whistles and reverse cameras and, you know, your stay in your lane warning signs and all that.
Yeah.
But you can over-engineer things, and I think we are to a degree guilty of that in the paranormal field. We over-engineer our investigations.
Yeah, no. When you do talk to the people that have been doing this for 20 plus years, they always say like the old school method of investigating always worked best because less chance of contamination
Mm,
and and you could just without all the gadgets you can actually just become one with your environment, like take it all in. You're not hearing things go off every 3 seconds, and
right.
as we all know, it's like today, like the equipment can be easily manipulated if somebody doesn't turn off their cell phone or somebody walks by the house on a cell phone. It can be easily manipulated. Where the old school method, pen, paper, uh, analog tape recorders, it's very hard to really fake what they're going to pick up because they're not easily manipulated as easy as it is if you've got like 50 gadgets going at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, REM pods are a great example. So I do like REM pods, but crucially, um, of recent years, I've started putting one REM pod in a Faraday cage, and that cuts down the amount of REM pod activity by at least 90%. In some cases, 95 to 100%. You know. But when a REM pod goes off in a Faraday cage, you can be sure it is not a stray signal from a passing, you know, vehicle-mounted radio set or something like that.
Right.
Fire trucks, police cruisers, ambulances, they all have vehicle-mounted radio sets. If they're driving by and broadcasting, they'll set off your REM pod, you
Right.
Oh,
know.
wow.
But if you really want results, if you really believe, you know, in trying to capture paranormal activity, then you should put some controls in place. On the other hand, the REM pods are crowd pleaser, right? How many times have you seen someone do this routine? They throw down a REM pod, it starts going off. They're like, "Oh, that's great. Come closer." It starts going off. Now stop, and it stops, and everyone goes, "Ooh!" The REM pod has a cycle. It will quit after it's triggered, right?
Oh,
Now, make it go off again. Pause, pause, pause. There it goes again. See, it's the spirits, everyone. Now make it
Right.
stop, make it stop. Come on, make it stop, stop, stop. There goes the cycle and it stops. Because so many people want to believe, they so desperately want to believe that they're not willing to think critically. If you put a shielded REM pod next to a non shielded REM pod and you see both of them go off, that's cool. If you see the shielded one go off and the unshielded one not go off, that's really cool, right? Because this is not stray RF signals you're dealing with. But that happens so rarely. And I think, again, the paranormal genuinely happens fairly rarely to us on investigations. But if you are, number one, doing public events, or number two, you've dropped $500 to rent a location, let's say, or $800 to rent a haunted school for 6 hours, naming no names. If you've done that and you've got this limited amount of time, there's a mindset, there's a bias that says, I better get something in here. I've come all this way. We've put a lot of money in. I better get something, some bang for my buck, right? So you're already biased walking in the door.
Right.
And I think throwing down the crowd-pleasing devices and then watching them go off and not thinking too critically is a trap it's really easy to fall into.
No, absolutely. And my thing is, I always think of is, if you're going to use a piece of equipment, know its functions and know what it does, because like you said, a RAM pod has cycles.
Mhm.
So of course it's going to go off, and it's going to do, it seems like it's working on command, but in reality it's just going through its system and doing what it's created to do. Whereas if you do control it and have some barriers in place, then you're getting more deeper and getting into better evidence review later
Mhm.
on. Um, Now, I always tried to see if things will relate on different types of devices. Like, if you
Mhm.
can get one device to go off, are you catching an EVP and are you catching something on your camera or your video at the same time?
Yeah.
Because when you put three things together, it's hard then to kind of say, well, no, it couldn't be this, because maybe something was going by and it triggered it, but it wouldn't create a video, or wouldn't create an image on the video or picture as well as an audio all at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I see Jason asking in the chat, how does one get their hands on a Faraday cage? Well, Jason, you got a couple of options. If you want, you can buy them. I mean, you can get them. Amazon sells them, but a lot of retailers will sell Faraday cages anywhere between like 50 and $100 to fit a REM pod. I make them. You can make one for $20, and here's what you do: you go to the nearest like Walmart or place where you would get groceries from, grocery store, and you buy those tinfoil baking trays that you would use to cook like a Thanksgiving turkey in. You get 5 of them. One of them is the base. Then you set the REM pod inside. Then you put 3 of them in a triangle to make the sides of the cage, and then the 5th one is the lid that you put on top. $20, and you've got a REM pod. And it will screen out about 90% of RF up to maybe 6 inches from the cage itself. They're pretty efficient. They're not 100%. The commercial ones are 100%, but the $20 Walmart version that you can make with spit and baling wire is still really, really good. And you can lift the lid off to manipulate your REM pod to test it and just put it right back on again. So real simple.
There you go. And I mean, that is quite interesting, and it is good experiment to try. When you go into locations, do you always try to do different experiments to try to see what works, what doesn't work, and what creates a reaction and what doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, I like era cues. So, for example, I'm big on playing music. If the haunting is a Civil War haunting, like I've done Gettysburg, different locations at different times. If you have that, then I like to play songs from the Civil War, from both sides, just for balance. That's a good example. When I investigated Fox Hollow Farm, the home of the serial killer, the I-70 Strangler, I met with a former boyfriend of that serial killer, and he said that his favorite song was Blue Bayou by Linda Ronstadt.
Wow.
So we brought the lights down in the swimming pool and fired up iTunes and played Blue Bayou, things of that nature, just to add a personal kind of connection to it.
Right. Now, when you go in and you start uh, your ideas for writing a book, now where does most of your inspiration come from?
Depends on the book. If it's based on a haunted location, I'm just looking at telling the story of the people that lived within those walls. Because ghost stories are essentially just the past given form and given voice, right? We're all future ghosts waiting to happen. So I'm interested primarily in those people, and they tend to be the starting point. What do we know about them? What do we know about them as humans? What were their hopes, their fears, their dreams, their motivations, things like that? That's where I tend to start. Um, it's cool to read about a haunted old whatever, a castle or a manor or whatever, but I'm mostly interested in the men and women that were the beating heart behind what is now a haunting.
You mentioned something interesting. So we're just future ghosts waiting to happen, which gave me a question. And I've heard this theory, and I love the word theory for me anyway. Some people don't like it. I like it because, in my opinion, this is all theory. None of us are experts for sure. However, sorry, my throat today. Anyway, my question is this: when we see ghosts, and it could go a couple ways, right? I mean, when we see ghosts, I mean, sometimes I remember Andrea Perrin shared a story about her mom at the house when Andrea was a little girl, and mom was setting dinner, setting the table for dinner, and she had told the kids to get out of the room, get out of the dining area, whatever. I'm setting dinner. So she's going through that process, and then at one point she had her back to the table, and she heard kids laughing. The mom and her mom turned around, and there was two kids sitting at the table, a woman walking around the table serving dinner. It was a full table, if you will, like full of everything, food, plates, etc. And then there's two gentlemen sitting there, and the one gentleman looked up and made eye contact with Andrea's mom, and then nudged the other gentleman, and then kind of made a motion with his head like, hey, look. So they saw Andrea's mom while Andrea's mother saw them. So now the classic, are we the ghosts, or are they the ghosts? Is it time travel? Is it an interdimensional, all of a sudden just meeting up, two different parallel dimensions meeting up at that moment in time, et cetera, et cetera? What are your thoughts on that?
I try not to use the word saw at all, because I'm not convinced that anybody sees ghosts.
Okay.
Not to split hairs, but I like the word perceived, and I'll tell you why. There are plenty of cases, you hear about, you have a whole bunch of people. I mean, I used to work at the Stanley Hotel for years, one of the most haunted hotels in the world. And there are plenty of cases where a tour of 20 people, 2 or 3 of them will see something odd and 17 of them won't. Some of them are distracted, sure, but why do some see this thing and some not? And I suspect that when we say we see a ghost, we're perceiving it some paranormal way in the brain. We're perceiving it psychically.
Okay.
So I don't know that our eyes are involved, and one of the tests I encourage people to use. I can't take credit for this. I forget where it comes from, but I know that this is something that was taught to me way back in the day, and I'm just passing it on. But is, if you think you're seeing an apparition, take a finger and just gently kind of prod your eyeball like that, bounce your eyeball. If you do that right now and you're looking at the screen, the image blurs. Why? Because you are distorting the shape of your eyeball deliberately, changing the way the light moves within it. You know that what is blurring has objective reality in front of your face, right?
Yep.
If you are perceiving something psychically, it won't blur when you do that, because light is not actually entering your eye from that apparition. You are perceiving it in some other way. So that's a real quick and simple test that you can do. So I think, or I suspect, many ghosts are perceived rather than seen.
Okay.
That is quite interesting. I've never heard of it that way before, but that is, another way to really understand how the brain works, and how we perceive things. Um, I always say that you can have a room full of people, something can happen, but not everybody's going to have the same experience, because I truly believe a paranormal experience is different to each one of us. The same thing could have happened, but we all see it differently. And I mean, it's how we take it in, and how people, I like to tell people have paranormal experiences without even knowing about it, but it's because how their brain uh reacts to it and puts it in as well, it has to be because the window's open. That's why I felt the cold air. Well, if you're
Sure.
sitting in a room with no windows, how is that even possible?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Well,
it's
wasn't it Conan Doyle writing as Sherlock Holmes that said, "Once you eliminate the possible, whatever remains must be the truth"?
what was that? What was kind of like I'm not sure if I saw the movie Others. I'm gonna have to go check that movie out now.
Yeah, don't let anybody spoil it for you, but it's a great movie.
As so you were actually over here in Canada, I think what is it, over a year ago, and you wrote about a
Hmm.
book about a Canadian family that bought a funeral home and turned it into their regular home.
Yeah.
How was that experience? Because I mean, that is, I watched the Netflix series on it. It was
Hmm.
quite interesting. Um, got to meet them briefly with you at the MI Paracon this year. Like
Hmm.
the very, very down to earth people.
Yeah.
Just want to get your. How did you like? What made you think like, oh, this will be a really good book? And it was a really good book. I finished it cover to cover, and it was
Hmm.
an amazing story. Like the experiment you guys did, and just seeing how the family reacts to the paranormal. Like,
Yeah.
I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, again, it comes down to the people. You know, they are a fascinating family. They're good friends of mine, the Blumbergs. And the idea of taking them and moving them into this funeral home, which to nobody's surprise turns out to be haunted. I mean, go figure, right?
Ugh,
Um, it made for great television, but you always wonder with any show like that how much of it is scripted, right? And how much is reality.
sure.
Um, so it makes you I was like, well, I would love to go behind the scenes with no cameras, with no network or anything like that. I'll get to your question in a minute, Jason. With no, pressure from any outside individuals, what would we find? So I reached out to them, and they, to their credit, they said, yeah, they opened their home up to me. They let me come in with a very small team to investigate, and that's exactly what we did. And the book was the result of that, and I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed that experience.
Yeah, it was, the experiments you guys did, and especially when it came to the Estes method. I
Hmm.
mean, it seemed to really uh, play key in giving information about who was in the houses and not, because it didn't always seem like it was always the same spirits. There was the regular spirits, but there seemed to be ones that were passing through.
Yeah.
And I always remember uh, s- in the story that always asking, now, was your funeral here, or do you live here?
Hmm.
You know, and that was like a cool response in finding out who is actually attached to the house or who just comes there because this was their kind of final final place where they were seen, I guess, as you would put it.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a divide between how roughly half of them seemed to want their story told or some aspects of it told, and the other half did not. They very much did not want that. So you had one faction that was trying to shut the others up. And when Heather, who is the mom of the family, when she went under to do Estes for the first time, she took to it fairly quickly. But she was frequently told, "Shut up, shut your mouth, be quiet." You know, not the nicest terms used for her either. So I think that house has a number of secrets, and we only uncovered some of them when we did that book. I can't wait to go back and work on the next part of that story, actually.
So Jason asks, when you see a child spirit in a haunted attraction, do you think you saw it or did you perceive it?
So he's talking about. I wrote about this in my book, The Haunting of Asylum 49. On Halloween night a few years ago, I saw or perceived a little girl that was pulling a woman in this. It's a full contact haunted house built in an old hospital, pulling her into one of the side rooms. I think in this case, I saw it, not perceived it, because she clearly had a grip on the lady's arm and was tugging the lady into one of the rooms. So I think this was a case in which the apparition was seen, not perceived. Um, but I don't know if that happens in the majority of cases or not.
Right. So your latest book, In Search of Demons,
Mm.
that I've ordered it. I haven't received it yet. I look forward to reading that one because Michael, John, and myself had the I wouldn't say the pleasure, but the we were part of an exorcism that was local here to us. A friend of ours was an exorcist priest here in Canada. He was working on a case close to us, and his team all got sick.
Yeah.
And so he asked us to step in and help him out on the exorcist case,
Right.
which we found quite like as an investigator, most people say, "Oh, I would want to be a part of that." It was very interesting. It was a lot to take in because you don't know what you're really thinking because you hear access, you think of demonic, you think of all these nasty things. But when we were there, like the lady that was actually possessed, like we she greeted us and we talked to her, and it was just like nothing was ever wrong. So in your book, what did you find the most interesting about getting into those types of cases?
Well, this is a book I've wanted to write for a long time, and I suspected it would be quite unpopular, because the paranormal field in the US has just gone all in on demons in the last 10 years. And when I started doing this in 1995, you know, there was really no trace of that or very little of it in the UK. And in the States, I think primarily you're looking at the East Coast, you know, the Ed and Lorraine Warrens and people like that. And then, of course, fast forward, you know, you get to 2009, 2010, certain TV shows like Paranormal State and Ghost Adventures air, and they suddenly start finding demons everywhere.
Yeah.
Go figure. And then when they do, lo and behold, other shows do as well. And so demons are all coming out of the woodwork now, apparently. And of course, every YouTuber is finding, you know, My Night of Hell in the Demon House and
Yeah.
things like that. It seems to be a race to the bottom in terms of one-upmanship. What's scarier than ghosts? Demons. Oh yeah, well I've got a demon. Well I've got a portal to hell in my location. You know, and it seems like there's a degree of hysteria to it. So
Right.
I'd wanted to go on a journey and find out what truth there was to it that I could find. I'd looked at books that said, you know, demons are very real and you're foolish if you try and seek them out and you should be terrified. And then there were books by skeptics that said, oh, this is a load of crap. Don't waste your time. And neither of those explanations seemed satisfactory to me, and neither of them seemed rigorous in terms of how well investigated were these claims. So I wanted to walk that middle path. And that was really what I did with the book. And I enjoyed that journey immensely. I really, really did. And I hope that the message of the book, if you believe in demons, this book won't convince you that they don't exist. And if you don't believe in demons, it won't convince you that they do exist. It just tries to lay out the evidence to let people decide for themselves.
Let's go down a different road here now. I'm going to get away from demons. I'm going to hit cryptozoology. And why I'm bringing that up, I mean, there's Bigfoot, and I'm a huge fan. Always been into Bigfoot. Well, not always, just the last few years. But then I really, 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 my guilty pleasure is Dogman. That's my all-time favorite. I'll talk your ear off about it. Even when you're sleeping, I'll keep talking to you. But the other things, too, that, I mean, they're coming to light. I mean, all this folklore we were told, you know, growing up, it's not real. For example, dragons. For example, fairies. For example, brownies, etc. What are your thoughts on any and if not all of that?
I laughed when you said cryptids, not because I'm being disrespectful, but
of course,
when I was asked what I wanted to do as a follow-up to In Search of Demons, I'd wanted to go in search of Mothman, and that's exactly what my September 2025 book is.
Wow.
It's co-authored with Tobias Wayland, and we went on the trail of the Mothman phenomenon, not just to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, you know, which is known as Mothman Ground Zero, and of course, hey Kim, it's wonderful to see you, my friend. The whole Mothman phenomenon fascinated me, and I really wanted to put boots on the ground. But also, I went to things like places like Van Meter, Iowa. Are you familiar with the Van Meter Visitor?
No.
Oh man, you got to look that story up. It's terrific.
What is the story? 1 second.
So,
Grab my note.
yeah.
Go
So I highly recommend a book by Chad Lewis, David
Yep.
Weatherly, and Kevin Lee Nelson called The Van Meter Visitor. In
Yep.
1903 in Iowa, small town Iowa, about 20 miles outside of Des Moines, a pterodactyl-like creature comes to town. This thing has a horn on its just
Yep.
above its beak, and it shoots this red beam of light around the town. So it terrorizes Van Meter over the space of 5 nights. The
Yep.
townspeople, this is Iowa in 1903, so they're heavily armed, you know?
Sure.
Everybody takes pot shots at this thing. They unload on it, and either they're terrible shots or it's bulletproof because they're not able to do it any harm. On the
Okay.
5th night, the visitor returns with what looks like a younger, smaller version of itself. So now you've got these two little pterodactyl / humanoid creatures. And the locals seal them up in this mine and then try and blow the mine up. And the visitor has never been seen since. So every fall, there is Van Meter Visitor Day in this town, and people descend upon it. I highly recommend going, just like the Mothman Festival. And, you know, when you dig into it, as I'm sure you're aware, the kind of the American Midwest is full of these stories of
Yes.
flying creatures, flying humanoids, things like that, including dragons, by the way. You mentioned
Yes.
dragons. There are all kinds of claims like that, and there are so many of them. So I am fascinated by it. Again, I come back to the whole, are they seen or are they perceived?
Right.
But the bulk of my experience in working on this project has been looking at Mothman.
Dale's favorite cryptid. That's Dale's favorite cryptid.
That is definitely one of my. That is a story that I've been so fascinated ever since I saw Mothman Prophecy with Richard Gere. I mean just the thought. When you listen to the whole story, like I said, it's just absolutely mind blowing
Mhm.
on the Mothman thing, and I still would love to get up to Mount Pleasant and
Yeah, you
just be a
should.
part of
Point
the
Pleasant, yeah.
Mothman Festival because I hear it's absolutely phenomenal to be a part of. Like the whole town is just embraces this whole culture.
It does, and we went out to the TNT area, as it's called, where they used to store TNT, where a lot of the Mothman sightings took place.
Yes.
We did
Those domes.
we did EVP sessions in one of those domes. You know, applying like traditional paranormal investigator techniques to trying to contact Mothman. But yeah, it was a fun and mind-bending trip to go put boots on the ground there and to write that book. So we'll have to talk about it when it comes out in September next year, which isn't all that far away.
Done.
Yeah, no, that'll
That'd be
be
great.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, because that's I think one of the. I mean, besides Bigfoot, I think like the Mothman is like one of the oldest cryptid stories that just does not stop. And you like even I think it was just a little over a month or two ago. I think it was somewhere in Texas. People believe they saw Mothman.
Sure. Well, and what's interesting now, of course, Mothman is perceived as this harbinger of doom, right?
Yeah.
The idea that he's supposed to appear when there's going to be a disaster, which kind of is cemented by the Silver Bridge collapse in Point Pleasant. And I got to go on the record here is I think that that's absolute garbage.
Right.
I talked to primary sources, to people in Point Pleasant. And first of all, the name Mothman only actually arose because of a reporter that needed a catchy name. They were all calling it the Big Black Bird because that's how it was described. Like imagine a black bird-like creature the size of a small Cessna. That's what everyone was calling it. It was only when a reporter wrote an article that said something like "Move over, Batman! Here comes Mothman." And of course, if you look at the late '60s, what was one of the most popular shows on US TV? Batman.
Batman.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a fairly easy leap to make. But none of the people in Point Pleasant associated the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge and all those deaths with the Mothman phenomenon until John Keel wrote his book and made that link for them. And then suddenly the idea that Mothman appears before, you know, tragedies and disasters became a thing. And if there is a plane crash, or we saw this with the ship crashing into the bridge tragically, and things along those lines. People are quick to throw in a Mothman sighting there, right? We talked about 9/11 earlier. Where was Mothman warning us about that? He apparently was taking a day off. and I'm not being flippant, but if you're going to warn of any disaster, you'd think one in which all those thousands of people die would be no Mothman. There are stories of like a Mothman of Chernobyl, but crucially, those only arose in the 2000s, long after Keel's book was out, and around the time that the movie with Richard Gere came out. Suddenly, there are these stories out of Chernobyl that people working at the power plant had nightmares and dreams about Mothman before the reactor meltdown. So it's become this weird global cultural phenomenon, right? Mothman is so easily identifiable. The red eyes, the wings, it's like, I think you could show most people in the street a silhouette of Mothman with those glowing red eyes, and they would know what it was.
Right.
But you couldn't do that. I'm sorry, Michael John. You couldn't do that with Dogman,
No,
or anything like that. Mothman has transcended, I think, our own little weird subculture and has gone full bore mainstream, right?
Yeah, I got to agree.
Yeah.
So true. I want to talk a little bit about your other guilty pleasure, your Legos. You are absolutely obsessed with Legos. This is amazing. Like, I dare to ask your most expensive Lego piece, because I look at the prices when I go to like a Toys R Us and I'm like, wow, there's people that would buy that.
I'm looking to see. I don't know if StreamYard lets you flip your camera around, but on my mantle, let's see. I'm just gonna have to turn my iPad. So how about this? But on my mantelpiece, you can probably see I have the big. I'm gonna just go up there. I have the big Millennium Falcon.
Oh wow!
From Star Wars, and then
that's Lego.
That's all Lego right there.
Amazing.
And then the huge Imperial Star Destroyer.
Wow. How long did that take to build those?
I'm kind of slovenly when it comes to things like that. So those took me a year.
I believe it.
Because wow, I'll tell you, there was a whole lot of gray on those builds, a lot of gray bricks. But yeah, I do love Lego. It's kind of zen. It's kind of cathartic. When I've had a rough night on the job, I like to come home and do something constructive, but a little bit mindless.
Yep.
And building Lego will fit the bill nicely sometimes.
And it's interesting because it says you have a particular bias towards all things Star Wars. And it's funny that you made those at a Lego. So I want to ask this. When it comes to Star Wars, you obviously must have some sort of a collection. What is your most cherished Star Wars item?
I own original storyboards. You guys know what storyboards are, right?
Yes.
Where artists will draw scenes from movies.
Okay, I didn't know what that was. Thank you.
No worries. So it's like they'll sketch out that in this particular scene, this spaceship will be here and the other spaceship will be there and stuff like that. Yeah. And then the special effects people use that as a template to actually, make the scene happen. I own original storyboards signed by the producer of the Star Wars trilogy, the original one, that were his personal ones, which is pretty cool to me. The fact that the guy had these, Robert Watts, had these in his hand as they were shooting the first 3 movies, and now I have them, is just, it blows me away.
Man, I have so it's funny. My chair, I don't have a plethora of Star Wars stuff. I have toys. I collect old toys, and like I have my own from when, nostalgia stuff when I was a kid. But so Star Wars, I have, what is it? I think he's a 16-inch, maybe I'm wrong on the size, 16-inch Darth Vader, one of the original ones that came out back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Of course, his red sword is missing, so I took a, what do they call those? God, trying to think of this. It's a skew. It's a skew. Lightsaber? Yeah, his lightsaber is now a skew for kebabs. It's a kebab skew.
If it works, it works.
It does. But that's my most cherished thing. I got it off of eBay back a few years back, and I was like, because I always wanted that as a kid, and I just never got that in my hands. So I was like, I need that in my life now. So that's my most cherished Star Wars story, anyway. But,
how about you, Dale?
For me, I'm a Batman fanatic, and I just got my hands on the brand new Todd McFarlane. He made a 1/34 scale cowl of Adam West's Batman.
Wow.
So that I was always in search because I remember it when I was a kid. You used to
Hmm.
be able to go to the store and they had the Batman cowl that you could buy. You could wear it and stuff like that. It was based off the Adam West. Uh, so I was always in search of one of those, and I've never got my hands on those. Now I could find them, but unfortunately, because Adam West has passed, people
Yeah.
want thousands and thousands of dollars for them now.
Oh, too
I mean,
bad.
that would be like my dream
Mm.
um, possession to have. Would be one of those original '66 Batman cowls. That would, but I do got the miniature replica, and I'm just quite as happy. But I collect all things Batman. Wherever I
Nice.
go, people buy me stuff that have Batman stuff, and it's funny because I was at Mid Michigan
Hmm.
Paracon, not this year but the year before, and there was a lady there. She was selling a Mothman shirt, but it looked like Mothman as a bat symbol, so I
Hmm.
had to buy it
Yeah, of course.
because it was like two guilty pleasures in one. So yeah, I'm a Batman fanatic. So keep me
I
around
love me
Batman
some.
stuff.
I love me some Batman. I met Adam West and I met Christian Bale.
Wow.
Also, they're both very nice. Um, and yeah, a shout out to our Paranormal's own Aaron Sagers. I don't know if you know Aaron, but
Yes.
well, Aaron's celebrating because he just got his first Batman issue published by DC Comics this month.
Wow,
That's
that's
decent.
awesome.
Yep, it is DC Horror Presents #2. It is a Batman story called Superstitious Lot, and highly recommended. So you'll see Aaron at a lot of paranormal conventions. I highly recommend you pick that issue up before it's gone and have him sign it when you see him.
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna go look for that this weekend.
Hmm.
So we are almost at the hour. Richard, we want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us here today to talk about your passion about the paranormal and your passion about writing books. Is there one piece of advice you would have for anybody out there that wants to become a writer? Like, what would be the one thing you would give them advice for?
Sit down and write, and don't quit. It's. I know it sounds trite, and I don't mean to, but um, I know a lot of people that have. I have friends that have, they've seen me write. They're like, I could do that. I'd like to do that. They've started writing and they've given up, and that's awful because then the world will be deprived of the story that only they can tell. Everyone has their unique story that they're best suited to tell. So sit down and write and finish what you write and put it out there. I know it's both simple and difficult, right? Simple and easy aren't necessarily the same thing. Running a marathon's simple. There's just that whole 26 miles of one foot in front of the other. And I couldn't do it. But writing a book, 80,000 words, is simple, but it's not easy. But how do you do that? One page at a time, one paragraph at a time, one line at a time, right? So sit down, don't quit, get it done, and then decide what you're going to do with it afterwards. But if I can do it, you surely can do it as well.
And speaking of your books, Richard, anybody listening, how can they reach out? They're like, you know what? I've never read one of his books. How do I find Richard Estep's books? Where and how and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Please.
I'm in your local library. I mean, chances are I'm literally in your local library because I love libraries and I'm a bit creepy. But no, you can get me from your local library. You can get my books from the usual online retailers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Waterstones, or have my stuff as well. That's usually the most common places to find my stuff.
And let's say someone wants to reach out to you directly and book you somewhere or just talk to you and say, hey, I got this ghost story I want to share with you, etc. How could they reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yeah, I'm on most of the social media. You can find me on Twitter as Estep, Facebook, Richard Estep Author. Let's see, Instagram, estep.richard, and even Blue Sky right now, Estep Writes, which is also what I am on TikTok, Estep Writes.
Okay.
So reach out to me through one of those.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's been a great pleasure sitting down with you for an hour, picking your brain, getting deep inside of how you tick. And we love every minute. I look forward to seeing you next year, hopefully at one of the amazing events that we're all going to be at. I look forward to reading more of your books, and definitely the Mothman one when that comes out. That'll be definitely on my birthday wish list, that one.
Thank you, Dale, and thank you, Michael John. I appreciate you having me on. I want to thank everybody that listened, whether you're live or watching the record. It's a real pleasure. I appreciate you. And hey, you know what? One last thing. It's coming up on Christmas, right? Times are tough. People are lonely. Believe me, I'm seeing a lot of this in my day job, or my night job, rather. Be a little bit kinder than usual towards people and cut them a little bit more slack, because everybody's suffering.
Absolutely. Those are great words. We are in the holiday season, and from us to you, Richard, we hope you and your family have an amazing Christmas and all the best in the new year. Like I said, I look forward to seeing you. And to the TPV Nation, I appreciate, me and Michael John appreciate you. We thank you for tuning in right now or later on or over on KGRA Digital Media. However you get your podcast sources, you're going to find us there. So with that, Michael John, are you?
You're already there. Go for it, bro. Go for it. You're on a roll. I was enjoying it.
All righty. So, folks, we will see you on the other side. In the meantime, and in between time, we like to say is happy hauntings.
Happy hauntings.